أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده وعلى الوارث مثل ذلك فإن أرادا فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بما تعملون بصير صدق الله العظيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. For the last couple of weeks we have been going in depth regarding the ahkam and the rulings of talaq and how much talaq a husband has, and we were speaking about the ahkam of raj'ah, taking the wife back after divorcing her. Also, we spoke about the ahkam related to iddah, the waiting period that a divorcee must spend before she can get married again after she was given talaq by her husband. Now, starting off ayah number 233, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to speak about the ahkam and the rulings regarding breastfeeding. And these rules regarding the breastfeeding comes in the middle of the ahkam of talaq. Before this, the ahkam of talaq were being spoken about, and after this, these couple of verses will go back to some verses regarding to talaq. So in the middle came the ahkam of breastfeeding a child. And why did these ayat come in the middle of the scenario and the talking of talaq? Is because sometimes when a husband and a wife, they divorce each other, and what happens is they may have a young child, an infant who is in need of being breastfed. So then what is the ahkam and what are the laws and the regulation regarding that? Sometimes what happens is when a husband and wife, they divorce and they have a young infant child, 1 year old, less than 2, a few months, then what happens is now it is difficult to come to certain consideration on how they can take care of this child. So what happens is sometimes the mother, who is now the ex-wife, she refuses to breastfeed the child. Why? So she can cause harm and take revenge on her husband, her ex-husband. Even though it is her own child, still she is still so mad and she has ill feeling towards her ex-husband that just to cause him harm and just to put him in certain difficulties, she is refusing to breastfeed the child out of revenge and with the intention of harming her ex-husband who is the father of this child. So this happens many a times when an ugly divorce takes place between a couple and they have a young child who is in need of being breastfed. Now comes complications between the ex-couple on how they can take care of the breastfeeding of this child. So Allah Ta'ala makes it very clear in these ayat, and there are certain rules that come out from these coming ayat. This was the reason why these ayat were brought in between the ayat of talaq, because it can happen that when a divorce happens and there's an infant, a child within the couple, then they tend to cause harm to each other, and this also causes harm to the child as well. So Allah Ta'ala says in the beginning of ayah number 233, وَالْوَالِدَاتُ يُرْضِعْنَ أَوْلَادَهُنَّ حَوْلَيْنِ كَامِلَيْنِ, that the mothers must breastfeed their children for 2 complete years. لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَةِ, for the one who intends to complete the period of suckling. So from this half ayah we come to know of certain rulings. Number 1, it is an obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed their child if they have no excuse not to. Sometimes the mothers, due to some sickness, the doctors, they recommend that she should not breastfeed the child. In this case, there will be no problem if she does not breastfeed the child. However, if there is no shar'i and no health-wise excuse for the mother not to breastfeed the child, and only out of harming the husband she refuses to breastfeed the child, then she will be committing a very big sin. So it is an obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed the child if there is no excuse for them not to. That is number one. Number two, we see Allah Ta'ala says that the period of breastfeeding is up to 2 years. That after 2 years it is haram for a child or anyone to be breastfed from a woman or their mothers or any other woman for that sake. And Imam Abu Hanifa mentions 2.5, so up to 30 months. So if the child is weak after 2 years and for another 6 months you breastfeed the child, there is no problem. But after 2.5 years, it is haram to breastfeed a child. And no person, no child, no one is allowed to drink milk from any woman after the age of 2.5, after the age of 30 months. So number one, we see it is an obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed their children if there is no excuse not to. Number two, the breastfeeding is up to 2.5 months, and after that it is haram. No one is allowed to suckle from any woman after this age. لِمَنْ أَرَادَ أَنْ يُتِمَّ الرَّضَاعَ, for the one who wants to complete the suckling period. So Allah Ta'ala says the suckling period is up to 2 years, and also other qawl up to 2.5. These are two major rulings we get from this part of the ayah. Another thing before we move on, we see Allah Ta'ala says وَالْوَالِدَاتِ, and the mothers should breastfeed their children. Allah Ta'ala did not say وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتِ, the divorcees should breastfeed their children. The reason why Allah Ta'ala used the word walidat is to remind the mothers that although you are divorced from your husband, you are still a mother. And by nature you should have the motherly traits, and you should still have that love towards your child, that you should breastfeed him. And just because you want to cause harm to your husband, you are still a mother. And a mother must show her motherly traits of having love and compassion for the child. Even though you may have ill feelings and animosity, and you want to destroy for no reason your ex-husband, you are still a mother at the end of the day, and you should do your part, and you should act like how a mother is supposed to act. That's why Allah Ta'ala says وَالْوَالِدَاتِ, the mothers, even though they are also known as mutallaqat, they are divorcees, but they should, Allah Ta'ala calls them mothers, so it can remind them that they should use their motherly love for their children as well. So these are two rulings. Number one, obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed their children if there is no excuse. Number two, it is up to maximum 2.5 years. Then Allah Ta'ala says, وَعَلَى الْمَوْلُودِ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنَّ وَكِسْوَتُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. It is upon the mawlud lahu. Mawlud lahu means the one to whom the child belongs to. Yani the fathers. It is an obligation upon the fathers to provide sustenance and clothing for the mothers with justly, bil ma'ruf. Now we know when a husband gives divorce to his wife, now she has to stay in the waiting period of 3 cycles. And in this waiting period, it is an obligation upon the husband to provide her sustenance and her kiswa, her clothing, and her expenditure. And after her iddah comes to an end, now the husband is no longer obligated to provide for his ex-wife. However, if there is a child, then he will be obliged to pay for the expenses of the child. So this is what comes out from this ayah as well. Now we see one more thing is Allah Ta'ala said وَالْوَالِدَاتِ. In the beginning of the ayah, the mother should breastfeed their child. So why didn't Allah Ta'ala says وَالْوَالِدْ لَهُ رِزْقُهُنَّ وَكِسْوَتُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ? The fathers should provide. Allah Ta'ala used the word mawlud lahu. Mawlud lahu means the one to whom the child belongs to. So one reason for this is sometimes the husbands, they may think that why am I spending on the child? Why can the mother not help out as well? Why are we being burdened with this financial state? Why are we being burdened? Even though they're also the children of our wives, why do we have to provide for them only? Why cannot they help? So Allah Ta'ala says at the end of the day, the child is ascribed to you. The child takes your last name. The child follows your lineage. So for this reason, Allah Ta'ala used the word mawlud lahu, so that a father does not think of it to be burdensome, that all the financial responsibilities are upon me and not his mother, even though she is also his parent, but it is only upon me. So Allah Ta'ala uses the word mawlud lahu, the one to whom the child belongs. Yani the father is the one who the child follows the lineage of the father, takes the last name of the father, is ascribed to the father. So you should not feel that it is a burden, that you are financially taking care of your child and all the financial responsibilities are upon you. So this is the reason why Allah Ta'ala chose the word mawlud lahu and not the word walid. So we see the choice of words that Allah Ta'ala used is absolutely magnificent and amazing. That shows this is only the kalam and the words of Allah Ta'ala alone. Moving along, after we mentioned the ruling that it is an obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed their children if there is no excuse for them not to, and if they refuse, then they will be sinners. And the maximum amount is 2.5 years. And the husband should provide for the necessities of the wife as long as she is in her iddah, and after the iddah up to 2.5 years when she is taking care of the child and breastfeeding the child. Then Allah Ta'ala says, لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها, that no soul shall be burdened beyond its capacity. Meaning, as much as a husband has, that is the amount that he should be providing for his ex-wife. Not that he is not making any money and now they're wanting to take thousands of dollars. Upon the capacity, Allah Ta'ala does not burden beyond it. Then Allah Ta'ala says, لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده. No mother should be harmed by her child, nor should any father be harmed by his child. Now what does this mean? When Allah Ta'ala says no mother should be harmed by her child, this means that the husband cannot force the wife to breastfeed the child if she has an excuse not to. Sometimes there may be some sickness, or she is unable to do it, and now the husband is forcing the mother to breastfeed the child even though she cannot do so. She is not in her capacity to do so. Do not do this. This is what Allah Ta'ala says. Do not harm them if they are unable to do it. وَلَا مَوْلُودٌ لَهُ بِوَلَدِهِ. Nor should the father be harmed by his child. Meaning, now the mother or the ex-wife should not refuse to suckle and breastfeed the child because of wanting to harm the husband. Nor should the wife or the ex-wife harm the ex-husband because of the child, because she is refusing not to breastfeed him, and now the husband has to look for other women to breastfeed the child. So at the end of the day, Allah Ta'ala is making it clear that no one should harm each other because of the child. And we see Allah Ta'ala keeps repeating بِوَلَدِهَا. No mother should be harmed by her child. No father should be harmed by his child. So at the end of the day, Allah Ta'ala keeps repeating the word walad, child, to remind the parents that at the end of the day, you are the parents of the child. And just because you may have some arguments, maybe you have some ill feeling amongst each other, do not make that a means of harming the child. You do your obligation as a father, and the mother should do her obligation like the mother should do. And this hatred amongst each other should not be a sabab and a means of causing harm to the child, which is the unfortunate reality when ugly divorces happen. The mother is harming the child because they're not allowing her to see the father. The father is harming the mother, vice versa, through the child. And this is absolutely haram, and Allah Ta'ala makes it very clear a person should stay away from such actions. So this is another ruling where Allah Ta'ala says, do not harm each other. Do not force upon one another if they are unable to do so. Do not refuse to breastfeed the child to take revenge upon your ex-husband, so he has to search and look for other women to breastfeed his child. Then Allah Ta'ala says, وَعَلَى الْوَارِثِ مِثْلُ ذَلِكَ. Upon the heirs is the same. Meaning, if the husband or the father of the child were to pass away, now the heirs and the inheritors of the child should take care of the expenditure of the child. Then Allah Ta'ala says, فَإِنْ أَرَادَ فِصَالًا عَنْ تَرَاضٍ مِّنْهُمَا وَتَشَاوُرٍ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْهِمَا. that if the mother and the father, they agree upon weaning the child before 2.5 years, then there is no problem. So when the mother starts breastfeeding the child, and now before the 2 years or 2.5 years, they mutually decide that we should put the child on regular milk and not the milk of the mother, then there is no problem if they see this is the best option for the child. Now, then Allah Ta'ala says, and before that, we mentioned a couple of rulings. Number one, the obligation of the mother of breastfeeding the child. Number two, we mentioned that it is up to 2 or 2.5 years. Number three, we mentioned that the father should be taking care of the expenses of the mother while she is breastfeeding the child. And number four, we mentioned that the parents should not be harmed by their children. The mother should not harm the father because of the child, nor should the father harm the mother because of the child. Now, before we move on, one other ruling that should be mentioned is if a wife and a husband, they are married together or they are in the iddat period, it will not be permissible for the woman to take wages from the man. So if a couple are married and they have a child and the wife says, pay me for breastfeeding the child, this is haram. The woman cannot demand money because she is the mother. This is her job, this is her duty. And this will be putting more obligations upon the husband. The husband is already taking care of her needs. The husband is already taking care of her clothing, lodging her, giving her whatever she needs. Now to add the condition of paying for breastfeeding, it is absolute dhulm and it is haram. Similarly, if a woman is in her iddah, after she was given divorce until the 3 cycles, it is still an obligation upon the husband to provide for the clothing and lodging the wife, just like as if she is his wife. So even if she's in her iddah, she cannot demand wages. So while she is married to him, or she's in the iddah waiting period, she is not allowed to demand wages. However, if it is post-iddah, and now they are separated, and we know it is not an obligation upon the husband to provide for his ex-wife, now this ex-wife can demand some wages for breastfeeding the child. This is after post-iddah. And what are the conditions? Is if she is asking more than what the normal person is asking, more than what the normal wet nurse wages are, then the husband can reject and refute this as well. However, the wife, she should not reject and refuse breastfeeding the child. If she wants some wages, she should ask the normal wage that a regular wet nurse should take. If the husband sees that she's demanding extra, then he can find another wet nurse to breastfeed the child. This is with regards to the wages for breastfeeding the child, because we see now sometimes the wife and the mother is demanding money for breastfeeding the child. Unfortunately, this is the reality of today. This is why Allah Ta'ala then says, وَإِنْ أَرَدْتُمْ أَن تَسْتَرْضِعُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا سَلَّمْتُمْ مَا آتَيْتُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. That if you both wish to seek a wet nurse, because for some reason the wife, she's unable to breastfeed the child, maybe due to sickness or whatever the case may be, and you guys both decide mutually that you want to hire a wet nurse, then there is no problem. إِذَا سَلَّمْتُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. As long as you pay the full wages to the wet nurse, everything should be clear before. Not that after she breastfeeds your child, now you are arguing with regard to the wages. Everything should be clear before. Pay her wage and she will breastfeed the child. One other ruling is if the child refuses the milk of any other woman besides his own mother, then it will be absolutely obligatory upon the mother to breastfeed the child, because he or she is not accepting the milk of any other woman. So this in brief was the laws and regulations regarding breastfeeding, whether it may be your wife, a divorcee, or a woman who was your ex-wife who passed the iddat and the waiting period. At the end, Allah Ta'ala says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, and fear Allah with regards to the rulings that have been mentioned. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ, and know that Allah Ta'ala is watchful of what you do. Allah Ta'ala knows your intent. If you are purposely intending to harm your ex-spouse, Allah Ta'ala knows of it. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ, fear Allah Ta'ala. This is why we mention again and again, every time Allah Ta'ala mentions important rulings, at the end Allah Ta'ala follows it by reminding the people to fear Allah. Fear Allah. Know that one day you are going to stand before Allah. Do not do the dhulm. The dhulm you are doing upon one another will come to an end in this dunya. and then you will be made to pay for it in the hereafter as well. So in brief, going again, the rules of breastfeeding. Number one, it is an obligation upon the mothers to breastfeed their child. If there is no excuse, she must breastfeed the child. If she is married to the father or in the waiting period, she cannot demand wages. Number two, it is up to 2.5 years. After 2.5 years, no one can breastfeed, no one can suckle from any woman. Whether it may be a child or even an adult, it is haram, it is not allowed. Number three, the father should bear the expenses of the mother who is breastfeeding the child. Number four, the husband and wife should not be put in harm and difficulty because of their child. And we explain what that means by refusing to breastfeed the child because you want to harm the mother, you want to harm the father, or you are forcing the mother to breastfeed the child even though she is unable to do so. And also we mentioned the wages of the mother. If it was post-divorce, it is the normal wage you can give her for taking her time. She is deserving of this as well. Moving along, the next couple of ayat. Now ayah number 234. Allah Ta'ala is mentioning the iddah and the waiting period of such a woman whose husband passed away. We mentioned that the iddah and the waiting period of a divorcee, a woman who has been given talaq, is 3 menstruational periods. Once she goes through these 3 cycles, she will be free to marry another man and she does not have to wait in the waiting period anymore. A woman who does not have hayd due to being in old age or any other reason, then her iddah is 3 months because she does not have hayd, she does not have her menses. Her waiting period is 3 months. A woman who is pregnant, if she is given divorce, then her waiting period until she delivers a child. Whether it may be 8 months, whether it may be 8 days, 5 days, if the next day she delivers the child, her iddah is ending. However, if she's waiting 6-7 months, that is her iddah. Until she delivers the child, this will be her iddah and her waiting period. Now what about the one whose husband passes away? What is the iddah regarding her? Allah Ta'ala mentions very clearly, وَالَّذِينَ يُتَوَفَّوْنَ مِنْكُمْ وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا يَتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ وَعَشْرًا. And those of you whose husband has passed away, وَيَذَرُونَ أَزْوَاجًا, and those of you who passed away and they leave behind wives, they should wait for 4 months and 10 days. So the iddah and the waiting period of a woman whose husband passes away is 4 months and 10 days, clearly mentioned in the Quran. أَرْبَعَةَ أَشْهُرٍ, 4 months, وَعَشْرًا, and 10 days. This is the waiting period and the iddah of a woman whose husband passes away. فإذا بلغن أجلهن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف والله بما تعملون خبير. فإذا بلغن أجلهن. So if they spend their waiting period, then there is no sin upon you for what they do, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all aware of what you do. A couple of rulings regarding the iddat of a woman whose husband passes away. While she is in these 4 months and 10 days, it is not permissible for her to adorn herself. She should not be wearing any sorts of adornment. She should not wear perfume. She should not be spending the night out in other people's houses. She should stay home. And if it such be that there is no one to provide for her, there is no one at her house to provide for her, then only for her will it be permissible for her to leave the house in the morning, but she must come back at night. However, the woman who her husband gave her divorce, it is not allowed for her to even go in the day because the husband is taking care of her. The husband, the ex-husband, remember it is an obligation upon him to provide for the woman whom he gave divorce. So the woman does not need to go out. However, when it comes to a woman whose husband dies, perhaps there is no one there to take care of her. She is all alone. There is no one spending upon her because her husband is dead. For her, she is allowed to go out in the day, take and find some sustenance, but she should not be spending the night in anyone's house. She should not adorn herself in other way, and she should show that she lost the ni'mah of marriage, and she should wait for 4 months and 10 days before adorning herself and before thinking of marriage again. And regarding marriage, Allah Ta'ala mentioned in the next ayah, وَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي مَا عَرَّضْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْ خِطْبَةِ النِّسَاءِ. That there is no sin upon you if you hint towards the marriage of such woman whose husband passes away. أو أكننتم في أنفسكم, or you hide it in yourself. What does this mean? When a woman is in her iddah because her husband passed away, it is not permissible for any man to use clear and unambiguous words that he is going to marry her. If he wants, he can hint towards that fact, and the scholars they mention, for example, he can say that I wish to have a pious wife, or I wish that I can be married. So you can hint towards the nikah, but you are not allowed to use clear words that I'm going to marry you while she's in her iddah. Once she is done, then you can marry her, no problem. That's why Allah Ta'ala says, عَلِمَ اللَّهُ أَنَّكُمْ سَتَذْكُرُونَهُنَّ وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا إِلَّا أَن تَقُولُوا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Allah Ta'ala knows what you will say to them. وَلَكِنْ لَا تُوَاعِدُوهُنَّ سِرًّا. Do not make promises to them in secret. Do not make a promise to them that after you spend your 4 months and 10 days, I promise I'm going to marry you. This is haram, you cannot do this. Let her wait her 4 months and 10 days. If you want to make a hint towards it, there's no problem. If you want to keep it in your heart, there's no problem. Do not use clear and unambiguous words and make promises that you will marry them. Let them spend their 4 months and 10 days. Then after that, you can do what you want. Do not make promises to them in secret. إِلَّا أَن تَقُولُوا قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا. Except that you can use, just words and just hinting towards the fact that you want to marry them, or hide it in yourselves, but do not make promises to them and do not make it clear that while they're in their iddah, you say, I'm going to marry you. A man should stay away from this. Then Allah Ta'ala says, وَلَا تَعْزِمُوا عُقْدَةَ النِّكَاحِ. Do not make the contract of nikah with these women who are in their iddah. حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ الْكِتَابُ أَجَلَهُ. Until they wait their 4 months and 10 days. Clear words Allah Ta'ala is mentioning. Do not do so. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ. And know that Allah Ta'ala knows what you are hiding in your hearts. What you do, what you say, what you show, Allah Ta'ala knows. فَاحْذَرُوا. So be fearful of the punishment of Allah Ta'ala. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ حَلِيمٌ. And know that Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is all forgiving and all forbearing as well. So in the second ayah that we did, or the last couple of ayat, we see the iddat of a woman whose husband passes away, which is 4 months and 10 days. And then we see that it is prohibited for a man to use clear words or to promise her that he will marry her once she finishes her 4 months and 10 days. You are not allowed to do this. Wait for her to finish her waiting period, and then you can make a contract of nikah and get married to her as well. Next, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala will speak about a couple different aspects when a man gives divorce to his wife without mentioning a mahar, or without, having relation with the wife. What are the rulings with regards to mahar? It is a detailed ayat which we will cover next time. So for today, we covered the ahkam of breastfeeding, and also the 4, 5, 6 ahkam we took out from this one ayah. And also we covered the ahkam of iddah, the waiting period of a pregnant woman, of a divorcee, of the one who does not have menses, and also the iddah of a woman whose husband passes away. It is all clear to us now. And also the ahkam related to a woman who is going through her 4 months and 10 days. So may Allah Ta'ala give us all the tawfiq and the ability to understand and to act upon what has been said. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.